"He doesn't look like he belongs here," he muttered, not bothering to lower his voice enough. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his expression neutral. Years of dealing with subtle biases had taught him how to maintain his composure. Instead of reacting, he leaned back in his seat, waiting for the situation to unfold. Moments later, the flight attendant returned, this time with another crew member. They spoke in hushed tones before addressing Marcus again. "Sir, we really need you to move to economy," the second attendant said, her tone more firm than apologetic. Marcus sighed quietly, then decided it was time to put an end to the assumptions. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching into his pocket, "but I think there's been some confusion." He pulled out his airline badge, placing it on the tray table in front of him. The gold lettering gleamed under the cabin lights. Captain Marcus Grant. Both attendants froze, their eyes widening as they processed the revelation. Marcus looked up at them calmly, his voice steady. "I'm a captain with this airline. Today, I'm flying as a passenger." The whispers in the cabin stopped abruptly, replaced by stunned silence. Passengers around him exchanged shocked glances, their earlier judgments now painfully obvious. Marcus leaned back in his seat, letting the truth sink in for everyone around him. And yet, he remained silent, waiting to see what would happen next. The cabin had fallen into an awkward silence after Marcus revealed his badge. The flight attendants exchanged flustered looks, their earlier confidence replaced with unease. The senior attendant quickly muttered, I'll go speak with the head purser," before hurrying to the front of the plane. Marcus remained calm, his face impassive, but inside he felt the weight of the moment. These kinds of encounters weren't new to him, assumptions about who he was, what he could afford, and where he belonged seemed to follow him everywhere. But today it wasn't just about him. The tension in the cabin was palpable, and every passenger was now paying attention. A man across the aisle, wearing an expensive watch and business attire, leaned toward his seatmate, speaking just loud enough for Marcus to hear. "He's probably just showing off that badge. You know how people can be." The words stung, but Marcus chose not to react. Instead, he turned his focus to the window, watching the ground crew prepare the plane for takeoff. Meanwhile, the murmurs among the passengers grew louder. A young woman in a sharp business suit seated a row behind. Marcus finally broke the tension. "Excuse me," she said, addressing the remaining flight attendant. "Why are you questioning this man's seat? He's clearly shown you he belongs here." The attendant hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. "It's just, we were trying to confirm—" "Confirm what?" The woman interrupted, her voice sharp. "If a black man in first class can actually afford his seat, because that's exactly what it looks like to all of us." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Several passengers nodded in agreement, and the whispers turned into open conversations. "She's right," someone muttered. "Why was he targeted?" Marcus turned in his seat, offering the woman a small, appreciative nod. He could handle situations like this, but seeing others stand up for him gave him hope. An elderly woman in the front row, Mrs. Thompson, spoke next. "I don't know much about flying," she said loudly, "but I do know respect when I see it or when I don't. This man is in uniform." "Uniform, for heaven's sake. What more proof do you need?" The remaining flight attendant stammered, We're very sorry for the inconvenience. We'll sort this out immediately." She hurried off, leaving Marcus to face the growing wave of support from the passengers around him. The young woman leaned over, offering a handshake. "I'm Lauren," she said with a firm grip. "I just want you to know, you're not alone in this." Marcus smiled. "Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that." The murmurs continued to ripple through the cabin, and Marcus noticed how the energy had shifted. It was no longer just about him. It had become a collective moment of accountability and self-reflection for everyone on board. As the flight attendants returned, this time with apologies and assurances, Marcus addressed the growing group of onlookers. "It's okay," he said calmly. "Mistakes happen. What matters is how we choose to handle them and what we learn moving forward." Lauren chimed in, her voice carrying the same fire as before. "Mistakes like this need to stop happening, and the only way that happens is when we call them out." Passengers began clapping lightly, an unexpected but heartfelt show of support. Marcus nodded, humbled by the outpouring of solidarity. And yet, the moment wasn't just about him. It was about a larger story, a story that viewers like you can help share. Moments like this highlight the importance of breaking stereotypes and standing up for what's right. Stories like these are what we're all about, showing the strength in unity and the power of speaking up. If you believe in making the world a more respectful and equal place, hit that subscribe button and join our community. Together, we can amplify stories that inspire change. The tension in the cabin reached a boiling point as the flight attendants retreated to the galley. Marcus remained calm, his years of experience teaching him how to handle turbulence, both in the air and on the ground. But this time, the turbulence wasn't his to manage alone. Passengers around him began speaking up, their voices growing louder with each passing moment. "This is ridiculous," a man in a casual blazer said from the row behind. "He's clearly a pilot. Why does he have to prove himself like this?" Lauren, the businesswoman who had supported Marcus earlier, stood up from her seat. "You know what's worse? If he weren't in uniform, they probably wouldn't even believe he's a pilot. It's 2025, and we're still dealing with these assumptions." Her words ignited a spark among the passengers. One by one, they began voicing their support. "This man flies planes for a living," said a younger man with a backpack slung under his seat. "He probably knows more about this aircraft than all of us combined." Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman in the front row, raised her voice again. "This is a disgrace. The airline should be ashamed. This man has earned his place, and we should be thanking him for his service, not questioning it." The murmurs turned into a chorus of agreement. Even passengers from economy peeked through the curtain, curious about the commotion. Some began recording the incident on their phones. Their cameras pointed toward Marcus and the first-class cabin. Through it all, Marcus remained seated, his calm demeanor unshaken. He raised a hand to quiet the voices around him. "Everyone, please," he said, his voice steady and composed. "I appreciate your support, but let's not let this get out of hand. This isn't about anger, it's about understanding." The cabin fell silent, the passengers hanging onto his words. He turned to Lauren and Mrs. Thompson, nodding his gratitude. "Thank you for standing up for me. It means a lot. But let's remember, we all make mistakes. What's important is how we move forward from them." The senior flight attendant reappeared, her face red with embarrassment. She offered Marcus a sincere apology, her voice shaky. "Captain Grant, I deeply apologize for the misunderstanding. It was never our intention to make you feel uncomfortable." Marcus nodded politely, accepting her apology. "I understand," he said, "but I hope this is a moment we can all learn from." As the flight attendants returned to their duties, the passengers continued to rally around Marcus. Lauren leaned over again. "You handled that with so much class. Most people would have blown up in a situation like that." Marcus chuckled lightly. "I've learned that staying calm often speaks louder than anger. But your support, and everyone else's, made all the difference." The young man with the backpack chimed in. "Honestly, man, you're an inspiration. I've never met a pilot like you before. You've just earned a lot of respect from all of us." The atmosphere in the cabin shifted completely. Where there had been tension and doubt, there was now camaraderie and admiration. Passengers exchanged nods and smiles, united by the shared experience. This moment wasn't just about Marcus, it was about all of us. Standing up for what's right and holding each other accountable is how we create real change. If you're inspired by stories like this and believe in spreading positivity and awareness, subscribe to our channel. Let's amplify voices and share stories that truly matter. Together, we can make a difference. As the flight reached cruising altitude, the hum of the engines filled the cabin. The earlier tension had dissipated, replaced by a quiet curiosity. Passengers were still processing what they had witnessed, and many glanced at Marcus with newfound respect. Marcus, always one to turn adversity into opportunity, decided to address the moment. Standing up, he faced the passengers around him, his voice calm but firm. "First, let me thank all of you," he began, his words cutting through the quiet cabin. "What happened earlier wasn't ideal, but the way you stood up and spoke out, it means a lot. It's not always easy to challenge situations like this, and I'm grateful for your support." Passengers nodded, their eyes locked on Marcus as he continued. "This isn't just about me or this flight. It's about something bigger, how we treat one another, how we view each other, and how we confront our biases. I've been a pilot for over 15 years, and I've seen this kind of thing happen too often, not just to me, but to others. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. What matters is that we learn from these moments. The assumptions made about me today weren't personal. They're part of something larger. But every time we address them, we chip away at those barriers. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly woman who had been vocal earlier, clapped lightly, prompting others to join in. "Well said, young man," she called out. Marcus smiled, his composure unshaken. "I want to leave you with a thought," he said, looking around the cabin. "What if the next time we're faced with a situation like this, we pause and think before we act? What if we challenge our own assumptions, even the ones we don't realize we have?" Lauren, the businesswoman, spoke up. "That's a powerful reminder. Thank you, Captain Grant." The younger man with the backpack added, "You're not just a pilot, you're a role model. Respect." As Marcus sat back down, the cabin was filled with a sense of unity and reflection. Passengers began talking among themselves, sharing stories of their own experiences with bias and assumptions. It was a rare moment where a group of strangers became a community, brought together by a single powerful interaction. Captain Marcus turned a moment of bias into a teachable experience for everyone on board. It's a reminder that our voices matter, and standing up for what's right can create real change. If you believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, educate, and unite, subscribe to our channel. Together, we can share more stories like this and build a community that believes in equality and respect. Hit that subscribe button now. Your voice matters too. As the plane began its descent, the energy in the cabin was noticeably different. Passengers who had started the flight as strangers now shared a sense of connection. The earlier incident had transformed what could have been a routine journey into a profound moment of unity and reflection. Marcus looked around the cabin, noting the subtle changes in expressions. People smiled at him warmly, nodding in acknowledgement as they caught his gaze. Lauren, the sharp businesswoman who had been one of his strongest supporters, leaned over as the plane leveled out. "Captain Grant," she said with a smile, "you've given us all something to think about today. You didn't just handle that situation, you turned it into something meaningful." Marcus chuckled lightly, his humility shining through. "I didn't do it alone," he replied. "Your voices made all the difference. That's the power of standing together. It turns small moments into big changes." The elderly Mrs. Thompson, who had been a pillar of support throughout the flight, chimed in. "Young man, you have a way of inspiring people. Don't stop sharing your story. The world needs to hear it." As the plane touched down, a ripple of applause broke out. At first it was soft and hesitant, but soon it grew louder, filling the cabin with appreciation, not just for the safe landing, but for the extraordinary lesson they had all shared. As passengers began gathering their belongings, several stopped to speak to Marcus. "Thank you for what you said earlier," a mother with 2 young children remarked. "It's something I'll teach my kids." "You've got my respect, Captain," said the man with the expensive watch, who had initially doubted Marcus. "And my apology." Marcus smiled, shaking the man's hand. "It's never too late to learn," he said kindly. As he stepped off the plane, Marcus reflected on the day. What had started as a moment of bias had become an opportunity for growth, not just for him, but for everyone involved. He knew that while the journey for true equality was far from over, each step forward mattered. This wasn't just a story about a pilot. It was a story about all of us. Moments like these show that we have the power to create change, one small action at a time. If you're inspired by stories of resilience, unity, and standing up for what's right, join us by subscribing to our channel. Imagine a world where stories like this are shared and celebrated, a world where assumptions are challenged and respect becomes the norm. Together, we can amplify these voices and spark conversations that matter. Don't just watch, be part of the movement. Hit that subscribe button now and help us share stories that inspire change. Let's make this journey together.